Welcome to the Afghan Eye YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Afghan Eye Podcast. I'm your host Sangar Paykhar, and in this episode our guest is Abdul Hai Qanit. Abdul Hai Qanit is a political analyst from Afghanistan who is currently pursuing a PhD in international relations at the International Islamic University in Malaysia. Qanit Sahib, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So first of all, I would like to ask you how many embassies and consularies are currently being staffed by the diplomats of the Islamic Emirate?
Yes, there are two kinds of this kind of engagement of Islamic Emirate with other countries. One is that the host countries are handing over the whole embassy to the Islamic Emirate, with the Islamic Emirate having the white flag in that embassy, and it's fully handed over to the Islamic Emirate. The other kind of embassies is that Islamic Emirate is sending diplomats to embassies, and the host countries are accepting those diplomats with the sign of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the current interim government of Afghanistan. So I think there are few embassies, mostly in the neighborhood of Afghanistan, like Pakistan, Iran, Central Asian countries, Russia, China, where they handed over the whole embassies to the Islamic Emirate. But in other countries, in a little bit far from Afghanistan, like countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and many other countries where the spokesperson of Islamic Emirate has said it's 14 countries where they have sent their diplomats and they're having engagements with those countries. So I think in these two lines, Islamic Emirate is sustaining to have engagement with the countries through the embassies.
Okay. Could you maybe explain what is so significant about the countries that have initially, right after the takeover of the Emirate, commenced their diplomatic relations with the current government, and the ones who have done this recently? Is there a difference between these two groups, or can we even speak of two different categories at this moment?
I think there is a third category to this as well. Those embassies who are still waiting to hand over these embassies to Islamic Emirate. I think the first one are these immediate neighborhood, I think without Iran, who found out, all of them, that there is no other way this government has came, and there is no, you can say, alternative to this government in the near future. So they have realistically given embassies to the government so that they have a channel of communication with the government, because without the embassy, you cannot have an effective channel of communication with the government. So they have handed over their embassies so that they have this formal communication with the current government of Afghanistan. But those embassies who have handed over today, they were waiting to see how does the Islamic Emirate respond to these countries. Many of these countries had a lot of fears from Islamic Emirate when they came in power. We have heard rumors that maybe Islamic Emirate will spill over to regional countries. We had these information, if you remember, that many countries around the region have deployed their forces on the borders because they thought there will be a dominoes effect that happened in Vietnam. Later, the Viet Cong in Vietnam went to Cambodia to conquer that country. So maybe they said they are in this mood of conquer, so they will come to other countries and encourage these Islamic movements around the region, and they will spill over to those territories. But this was a false perception, which didn't happen. So most of the countries realized that there is nothing in Islamic Emirate have assured again and again through foreign ministry and other channels that we're not willing to go to other countries. Our agenda is national inside Afghanistan, and they're willing to pursue diplomatic relations with other countries. Like you see, Iran, it took a lot of time for them to normalize with the current government in hand or the embassy. And so was the Tajikistan. We have seen last week that a consulate in the Tajikistan Badakhshan province have a delegation of Islamic Emirates have visited that consulate. It means that there is no alternative to that. Today or tomorrow, at the end of the day, all these regional countries would come to deal with the current government. So this is the underlining, you can say, principle. But some countries have realized this first day, and some of them are realizing it now, gradually, day to day.
One of the countries, I believe, was Uzbekistan, that right after the takeover, they commenced their diplomatic relations. Pakistan, obviously, they always had contact with the Taliban, so it makes sense that Pakistan commenced their diplomatic relations with the Emirate. But we see a difference. So Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are neighbors of Afghanistan, but yet Uzbekistan was quicker to start their relationship, but Tajikistan is more hesitant. The same thing applies with Iran. Iran was also very hesitant. So how would you explain that?
I think all these are because of the priorities of the host state. Some states have seen that they prioritize their interests, national interests, and they had like Uzbekistan had very big giant projects in Afghanistan. We are buying electricity from Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is planning to go and connect with the South Asia because it's an energy-rich country. So they prioritize realistically their interests, and they started to deal from the day first. But Tajikistan, Iran, I think they had their own other specific political interests with other groups whom they were hosting in their cities, and they thought that maybe something will happen. International community would come to sponsor and support them in Afghanistan, but that didn't happen because when the war was going on in Taliban did not yet conquer the Panjshir province. Where the fight happened that night, we saw that the State Department of the United States have issued a statement said that the Panjshir conflict is an internal affair of Afghanistan. We do not have any say in that. This has a very vibrant and clear message to everyone that we are not going to support any military group inside Afghanistan because their priorities were shifted to Ukraine, Taiwan, South China Sea, and Eastern Europe. So I think these countries waited that maybe because of some policies of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the international community would eventually come and they would support these groups and these countries. This didn't happen. So now, realistically, first Iran and now Tajikistan is slowly normalizing with the Islamic Emirate.
Okay, so as far as I know, there is also some diplomatic engagement with Malaysia and Indonesia. Since you are studying in Malaysia, maybe you can shed more light on what are the developments there, because obviously those are also Islamic countries, and you would say even though they are not neighbors of Afghanistan, on certain grounds we could say that they do have some kind of cultural and religious ties with Afghanistan. Did that play any role in the fact that they decided to establish their diplomatic relations with the Emirate?
In the past 20 years, in Southeast Asia, we have just two embassies, Indonesia and Malaysia. In these two countries had no role in supporting the American military presence in Afghanistan. They were not part of NATO. They did not supported NATO. And Malaysia had no embassy in Kabul, and until now it has no embassy in Kabul. There was no engagement of Malaysia at all with Afghanistan, very little. And that was also in the field of some students, scholarships, education, in some other areas. But there were no political relations between Malaysia and in Afghanistan. Indonesia have started to play a role in the peace process in Afghanistan. They were active in supporting peace in Afghanistan at that time. After the takeover of the Islamic Emirate in Afghanistan, both of these countries, since they did not support the previous regime, financially or politically, they had no choice but to deal with the reality. And I think now they're dealing with the reality that they're normally dealing with the current government, maybe accepting diplomats or telling the embassies to engage with the current government of Afghanistan. And I think this is a realistic approach to Afghanistan because now, whether someone accepts or not, this is the government in Afghanistan. In countries, if they want to have engagement with Afghanistan, they have to have a communication line. An embassy is that communication line with the government. We have seen last week Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, have given a statement in OIC in Saudi Arabia, and he said that we want to have engagement and cooperate with Afghanistan, with the current government. So this cooperation cannot happen if there is no embassy. So they know this realistically, that the first move to do this is to make the embassy being active between Malaysian government and the Afghan government. And I think this is the approach of not only Malaysia and Indonesia, many other countries as well, but some of them have announced this and some of them are keeping it somehow secret, or they're not exposing this. But without line of communication, nothing happens.
Speaking of quietly establishing diplomatic relations, do you think that some countries may have some hesitation because they think if they establish relationship with the Emirate, that may somehow negatively affect their relationship with, let's say, the United States? Would that be a legitimate concern?
I think there are two aspects to this. One is that, of course, this is sensitive because United States would never want other countries to go and engage with the current government, recognize it formally, because in their thinking, if we do not have these pressure cards against the government, we cannot make them bend to what they want. So this is an external factor, but there is internal factor as well, and this is more important. That factor, for example, is the education policies of the current government, which is not welcomed in many states. Even if there is no problem, they cannot normalize because these are democracies outside, and the people will come out, ask their governments that how can you normalize with a government who's not accepting education to girls and women in the universities and schools. So that's also an internal factor that we have to solve from our side, because if we solve problems from our side, the external factor with the passage of time will fade away, and there will be a way out for countries to come and engage, whether secretly or openly, with the current government.
One of the things that we have observed in the last couple of days is that the Chinese government and the Russian government are having talks that are raising eyebrows and raising concerns in the West. It is being said that the United States is losing its position as the sole superpower, and that the world is moving back towards multipolarity, just like it was during the Cold War. Do you agree with this assessment that the improvement of relationship between Russia and China as partners in economy and local politics, and maybe even the conflict in Ukraine, do you think that these developments have an impact on Afghanistan as well, because obviously, generally, most people have this sense that Afghanistan is not being recognized because the United States doesn't want it to happen as the most powerful country of the world. But then Russia and China, they are basically trying to change the game of international politics. How does this development impact Afghanistan?
One thing is very clear, that the world is no more a unipolar world where the United States is making all the decisions on in the international system. There are other powers, regional powers like China and Russia, rising in talking eye to eye to the United States. And I think now, in our region, there is a big development happening. It's not just about China and Russia. It's about Saudi in Iran. It's about Turkey in Syria. It's about Syria in Saudi, Syria in UAE. It's about many other countries normalizing with each other. And I think this is one of the signs in our region that the multipolarity, that all the regional powers have accepted that the world is moving toward a multipolar system where United States have no power to tell us what to do and what not to do. So Russia and in Saudi coming together, Saudi doing normalizing relations with Iran is actually a negative message to Israel in the region, and that's what America doesn't want. And normalizing Iran in the region is something that America doesn't want. So all these dynamics in the regional politics around Afghanistan has an effect on Afghanistan, and it could be a positive and negative both, but it depends on how the current government of Afghanistan responds to this, because it can fall negative if whatever happens in the region, if the government doesn't listen to it, and the government doesn't prepare to be part of this regional coalition or regional settlement or arrangements. So I think the government should have a policy how to be part of this whole transformation happening in our region. If the government becomes a part to this, it talk to Russia, China, and other regional powers, I think there is a lot of possibility that we would integrate into the region, and we will have a lot of opportunities from these big markets. Economically, we would have opportunities, politically, diplomatically. But if there is no plan for this, for us to integrate with the region, of course, we have an issue with the West, and there is no possibility of normalizing with the West in the near future. So we will have problem. Of course, we will be left over from both sides, and we will be left over an isolated state from the multipolar world. And that's not what Afghans want, what Afghanistan should be. It should have preparation in plan to be part of any settlement at once.
The current government distinguishes itself by its political ideology and belief system, by setting itself as exclusively Islamic and opposed to all other international norms with regards to whether it's human rights or other matters. Basically, they oppose the current world order. On the same time, at the same time, we also deal with the fact that Afghanistan is a nation state, and as a nation state, it operates in the international political order as such, which, from a perspective of international relations, you would say that okay, whatever your beliefs are, the international arena is not exactly ideological. Like, for example, you have countries with opposing belief systems and cultures and values, but they are still allies when it comes to political dynamics in the region. Doesn't that create a problem.
One thing is quite clear, as you have mentioned before, that the current government of Afghanistan is a new phenomenon in the international system. We do not have any example of IEA somewhere else. It's initiated in Afghanistan, with the shape it came to power, with the fashion it came to power was a revolutionary fashion. It was not a democratic. With these kind of governments, like if we go and see in the history, the same happened with the Bolshevik revolutions in 1919, in that time Soviet Union, when the Russian Empire got defeated and Soviet Union was established. It was very difficult for the leaders of Bolshevik revolutions to normalize with the international system, because that was a new phenomenon that was not introduced, as if introduced theoretically, that was not seen practically in the world, in the international system. The same happened with China, with the Chinese Communist Party came in power in 1949. Mao Zedong, it was very difficult for him to normalize with the world. It took lots of time, 2 decades, to find a way to normalize with the world powers and become formally part of international system. For 20 plus years, it was not recognized as a state. The same happened with Vietnam. In Vietnam, with the United States got defeated, Viet Cong, it was difficult to normalize with the international system. It took a long time, 20 years. 1995, it got normalized with the international system. Now it is an integral part of the ASEAN organization, which is a very effective organization in the Southeast Asia. Afghanistan is the same case. It will take a long time to normalize with the international system, but it depends on how the government prepares for that. It's all internal job of the IEA leadership to get prepared for how to find ways to build trust. There is a lot of trust deficit in the region, beyond the region, with the Western world, with the United States. So we have to find out the way to overcome this trust deficit, and build trust with all these countries and become a normal state in the international system. It will take a long time, because it cannot happen just with saying it or stating it on the paper, or a deal or accord. No, but they should see it practically, whether this Islamic Emirate, how Islamic Emirate is behaving in the international system. So behavior has been traced all around the world, what Islamic Emirate is doing. So it's all about us. We have to transform our internal policies. We have to have effective internal domestic policies. And when it is accepted internally, I think there will be no issue, and slowly it will turn towards positive direction to have relations with the other states outside the world. So of course, this is the case, and it's all, I think, 50% job is ours domestically for the government to prepare for this. But of course, this revolutionary kind of governments are not being recognized overnight. It takes some time to be recognized.
Based on your personal experience as a political analyst and as a student of international relations, would you say that the Emirate currently has the capacity to develop its own policies into, turning into a partner of the other countries as a stable and reliable entity, without being seen as a threat, or without being seen as a radical regime that has expansionist ideas? Are there enough scholars, academics, experts currently involved in developing policies and improving those ties?
I think there is capacity inside the government to that extent that it normalizes with other states. And second, very positive factor to this is that the international system is very good organized for the IEA. The whole change happened in August 2021 in a time where the whole international system is transforming. So there is a lot of opportunities for the government to grab them, and that needs a plan. For now, the threat narrative that many countries had around the region and abroad is fading away. There are no more concern about Islamic Emirate spilling over to the region and conquering other countries, encouraging other Islamic movements around the world to rise against their governments. But Islamic Emirate has injected this narrative that we were fighting against occupation. And once the occupation is finished, we are having our country and we are establishing our government. And the government is so far effective in economic policies, controlling the system, building a military, a brand new military. It's a very difficult task to do in this kind of very short time. In the same time, establishing diplomatic relations within 1.5 years with many countries around the region. I can say this is a job of the government that has done effective job, but also the region is also, I think, the situation, the atmosphere is very well organized for this kind of engagement. And I think there are a lot of other opportunities too, but depends on us how we are going to plan for that, and we are going to grab those opportunities. But one thing is clear, since we have something to do in our domestic policies, we have to change our some of the domestic policies, like education policy, that all the states around the world, Islamic and non-Islamic, have this kind of concern about this. And this is not just concern of the government. It's beyond politics, beyond interests. It's concern of the people of those governments, in those democratic governments who are being elected in 5 years. They're afraid that if we normalize, maybe after 5 years when they're going for elections, the opposition parties will use this against them. And this normally happens. Now you see Trump in the United States normally using the narrative of the debacle in Afghanistan against Biden. This will happen everywhere, and that's what countries are afraid of.
If you could advise the foreign ministry in Afghanistan and the whole emirate, if you could give a list of specific things that they need to do to improve their relationship with the rest of the region, where they still don't have a recognition or maybe they still don't have an embassy, what practical steps do they need to take in order to achieve that?
First thing that I think before we go to other countries and talk to them and ask them for normalizing relations and plan for that, the first planning will start from inside. We have to transform our policies domestically, the policies that we have talked about before. And after that, I think all the countries have their own concerns individually. There is nothing collectively. Those things collectively, like a threat or spilling over to the region, or expansionist policies, or maybe encouraging Islamic states around the world, this concern has been faded away with other countries. Countries have their own specific things to talk about with the Islamic Emirate. For example, Pakistan has an issue or two to talk with the government to find a way for its solution. Iran has, China has issues, maybe security or other issues. Russia has its own issues. United States have a lot of issues to talk to the current government. But we have to go prepared to that battle in the international system. And the preparation for that is, first thing, that we have to transform domestically. And after that, we go with a plan to sit with all the international actors. I don't talk about individually each country, because the most important thing is that you have to talk to the powers, because we are living in power politics in the world. You have to talk to Russia, China, United States, and other powers, and convince them, and talk to them, find shared points where both of these countries, Islamic Emirates with other countries, can work together and find a way to move forward. So I think it will start from domestic homework, and then it will extend to go to other countries and talk to them about normalizing relations.
Okay, what I would like to know is, let's just say, all the Asian countries, the Middle East, all these countries normalize their relationship with the Emirate. They all open their embassies and maybe even officially recognize the Emirate as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. But Europe and North America and Australia and New Zealand, they all say, you know what, we're not dealing with this government. Do you see that as a problem?
It is a problem. It is a problem because we cannot just have this one region dealing with us, and we cannot overlook a vast region of the Western Hemisphere because that's an important region for us. We have to have trade, we have to have relations, and in the multipolar world, the most dangerous thing is that you are going to, for Afghanistan, for a territory like Afghanistan, to go to one pole and then overlook the other pole. Because historically, when we have done this, Afghanistan has become a center for wars, and that shouldn't happen. We have to find a way to normalize with all the countries. For example, we have seen 4 days ago that the foreign minister of Afghanistan have written an article, an op-ed to Al Jazeera English, where he has mentioned that we are ready to talk to the Western governments, specifically to the United States, about normalizing relations. But I think it will take a lot of time, but without normalizing to the whole world, the Islamic Emirate cannot become a successful government. This is important for it to become part of the whole international community, to set in the United Nations, represent Afghanistan and Afghan people to the whole world.
Let's go back to the history, okay? So, during the reign of King Zair Khan, Afghanistan was in a sort of an isolation. On the one hand, we had the Cold War starting right after World War II. On the other hand, China was still emerging as a power, but it wasn't exactly the powerful state that it is now. And King Zair Shah's reign came to an abrupt end with Sardar Muhammad Dawood Khan. And they say about Sardar Muhammad Dawood Khan, if I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but they say he used to light his Russian cigarettes with American lighters. They say that because they say he was trying to hold this balance of the West against the East during the Cold War, and basically benefit from both sides. But he wasn't smart or cunning enough to outplay those two powerful states, and Afghanistan was embroiled in conflict and war. This is a telling of how the war started in Afghanistan. I'm not sure if you agree or disagree, but if we look back at our past and look at our current situation, would you say that the Emirate also needs to play a very skillful game of balancing different powers against each other in order to stay afloat and not to be just in the back pocket of Russia or China or United States?
I think the international system has recently started to become bipolar or multipolar. I think there is a lot of opportunity for, I think, a decade now, that a lot of states would act as a balancing powers, balancing these powers. Like, for example, we see the Southeast Asia. We see countries in the South China Sea. We see countries like India balancing China, balancing Russia in the United States because they need energy in lower prices from Russia, and at the same time are part of Quad with the United States. In the time of Zahir Shah, or before that, before Dawood's reign, in Afghan history, we were balancing these powers, but we were balancing them. I divide them in balancing in two kinds. One is when a state is balancing two world powers negatively. I say it negatively. When you are static, you are not doing anything, but you are saying I'm not with anyone. But others, like the second type, is the dynamic policy of balancing powers. In that dynamic policy is what India is doing now. From one part, from one side, they're part of Quad alliance with the United States, but from other side, they're talking to China, and they're importing Russian gas and oil to India. In the same policy has been played out by Pakistan in the Cold War, by many other states like now Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, countries around, you can say East Europe. Some countries are playing this game. They're normalizing with China, in the same time talking to Russia. Countries like South Korea, where United States has a third defense system against China, but they're trading with China at the same time. So I think this kind of dynamic and active balancing foreign policy would be a solution for the current government. It's not just sitting behind and saying this, that I'm not going to deal with anyone because I'm balancing them and I'm not part of any coalition. This would not work because it's not in our national interest, in neither in a policy at all. It's not a policy to back off and say, well, I'm not doing anything because I'm balancing. I'm not going to be part of anyone. But the smart thing is that you become part of one, and in the same time, in other fashion, become part of other pole that's balancing each other. And I think we can play this role very well, but it needs smart minds, good policies, and good plan to go and play this out with these world powers. I think this is a difficult job.
If Afghanistan is going to play this dynamic game of balancing different powers, what does Afghanistan have to offer that would be of interest to other countries? Currently, like, we all talk about rare earth minerals and whatnot, but Afghanistan doesn't even have the money to extract them. So why would these other countries be interested in dealing with Afghanistan? What has Afghanistan to offer as a player in the international arena?
I think this rare earth materials and the economic benefit for world power is just an illusion about Afghanistan. I don't accept that at all, because they don't need Afghanistan in that sense. There is a lot of them in the world and other countries. Afghanistan is important for its strategic what do you call it? Strategic place. It's a strategic location. So this strategic location is important for Russia, for China, and for the United States. Afghanistan, I think, is the world's only country which is in between all the nuclear states around it. Pakistan, India, Russia, China, Iran. All the nuclear states around a small state. See its strategic location. So I think the center of the future international politics is this region, South China Sea, Russia, China, in regionally Iran, Saudi, and other countries. In Afghanistan cannot be disintegrated from this. The West in the United States would need these states like Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in India, in this region. They cannot have this influence in the Central Asian countries because they're under the influence of Russia, and they cannot deal in these terms with Iran because they have their own troubles. They cannot deal these things with other countries, but they can deal these strategic dealings with Pakistan, with Afghanistan, with India in our region. And I think the West, for that purpose, needs Afghanistan a lot because we are the backyard or the neighborhood to their enemies in the region. So that makes us very important that we are neighboring the biggest powers in the world in future. Rare earth materials, I think, is not an important thing for the Western countries. And for this purpose, Russia and China will try to safeguard Afghanistan because it's the backyard of them, and they are reluctant that it should not go to have open in strategic relations with the West. And West would try its best for Afghanistan to have influence here because it's neighboring with those big countries. So this is the opportunity for the current government to sort out and to manage how to balance them while benefiting from both of them, and in the same time not giving up everything to both of them. So that's it's very easy in saying it, but it's very difficult thing in practicing this kind of policy. It needs a lot of mind thinking to sort out how to do this. It needs Kissingers of Afghanistan or Brzezinskis of Afghanistan to sort out such policies.
And do you think that we have that kind of people currently in Afghanistan?
I think we can find those kind of people, but the most important thing is that the government should try to find them out, bring them to Afghanistan, open up for them, and provide opportunities for those kind of people. Afghans are very patriotic people. They love their country. They would serve under any government, but as long as they find out that they have been utilized for the national interest of their country. And I think that a lot of people in the West, in the Eastern countries, and many universities, scholars, in people who can come if the government targets them, bring them to Afghanistan, provide them space in the foreign ministry, and utilize them for the benefits of our country.
But if we are going to benefit from all the Afghan academics, experts in international relations and economy and everything else, the Emirate does have to change its policy with regards to women's education. I personally don't know any educated Afghan who would support this policy. And I think this is a big hurdle in uniting the people in Afghanistan, because as long as the government has these bizarre policies of not opening schools for girls, I think it also discourages a lot of people from trusting the government, being part of it, and serving this government. Don't you agree?
I agree 100%. That's what we have mentioned before. Not just only Afghans, but international community. Even if you solve all the problems with the international community, I don't think any country would come forward to normalize and recognize the government having normal relations without girls' education, because especially democratic countries who are going to have elections after 4 years, they are afraid of their own vote bank, and that's a concern for them. And because I see you're living in the West, I lived in the Southeast Asia and South Asia, and I've seen that it's not just policies of the government. People are responding to this, that the government have to change these policies. And domestically in Afghanistan, we have seen all Afghans want this. So I've seen that there is a homework domestically for the government to do. After we finish that homework, we can go to the international community, we can go to our Afghans, we can go to our intellectuals, scholars, and bring them to Afghanistan, because they will feel that the government is moving in the right direction. Now, because of these few mistakes in policies, everyone is thinking outside that it's not a place for us because it's moving in the negative direction, especially in terms of education policies. So I think there is a reform needed inside domestically, and then later I think all doors are open for us. Inside Afghanistan, there is no opposition. Outside world, the international system is changing. There are a lot of opportunities for us to go forward and grab those opportunities.
Speaking of grabbing opportunities, you grabbed your opportunity and you're studying in Malaysia. Tell us about it. What is it like to be a student from Afghanistan in Malaysia?
Of course, in Malaysia, it's from one side, before everyone was telling and counting our country in those war-torn countries like Yemen, Iraq, like Syria, in Palestine, in that has no good feeling, because you have been dealt to as if you're coming from a country which is less developed, where there is war, conflict, fighting, killings. But now, after 2021, 15th of August, there was a lot of optimism about Afghanistan. About Afghanistan in Southeast Asia and many countries. This is famous that this is the only nation in the world who have defeated 3 empires in its history, and it's a big credit. Some people are talking about it in those countries, but we have to change these things that have made people pessimistic about us now, because people see from outside and they think all these education policies and other policies are part of our society, and they again are starting to have negative feelings about Afghanistan and about this whole change. We have to transform this, and I think there is a lot of soft power in Islamic countries for Afghanistan because of its bravery, because of its independent mentality of Afghans. I think this is another opportunity for us to grab in other nations and build our soft power in those countries, but it needs planning to be done, and I think it should be done as soon as possible.
And are there a lot of Afghans in Malaysia? Is the Afghan community there? How big is it?
I think it's around maybe 2,000 to 2,500 some refugees from long time staying there, and then United Nations taking them out to Australia, Canada, United States. And there are students who are pursuing PhDs, masters, bachelors. A lot of students I've met are pursuing PhDs in Sharia, Islamic history, and Islamic jurisprudence, in international law, in international relations. I have friends there pursuing PhDs. All of them are the assets of Afghanistan that we have to bring them in and provide them opportunities.
There was an Afghan, he's half Afghan, half Dutch, here in the Netherlands, and he migrated to Malaysia. And he's working in Malaysia. I think he's also involved in some kind of university as a teacher. He had a background, I think, in political science and pedagogy. But he once told me that for Afghans who are living in the West, if you cannot go back to Afghanistan because of the war, life in Malaysia is actually quite good. So how would you describe life for Afghans in Malaysia?
I agree. Afghans are welcomed in those countries. It's not like West. There is no that kind of, I would say, racism, in that kind of hate towards Muslims. And in Afghans, Malaysia is 60% plus Muslim country, and it's a good country for Afghans to go. I have been contacted by many of my friends who are living in the United States. They want to send their children for school and for the universities to either Turkey or Malaysia, and I always prefer and talk to them to send them to Malaysia, because there is a good environment for them to pursue their studies and keep their ideals as well, because Malaysia is famous for their Muslims are very good Muslims, and they are practical Muslims, practicing Muslims. So it's a good country. As an Afghan living there, you do not see this, that as if you have come to other country, you do not see this in the markets while dealing with the people, in the institutes, in the government offices, that you have been dealt differently. It's not the case as we have been hearing this in the West, because I haven't seen it myself.
Yes, in the West, it's different. Sometimes there is some hostility and hatred, and sometimes it's not. But being a Muslim in the West is very difficult. Like, for example, it's Ramadan, we are fasting, but the whole environment, everyone else is not fasting. So you do feel you do feel excluded from being part of a community, because at the end of the day, your religion, your values, and everything, it defines who you are. So I think for many people, it would be preferable to be a refugee or live as an immigrant in an Islamic country than to be in the West. But let's hope that everything that you have said and everything that you have explained about what the government in Afghanistan needs to do to improve its relationship with the rest of the world, that they listen, and that Afghans come together and work towards long-term stability, so that we all can return back to our country and live in Afghanistan. Abdul Hai Qanit, it was very informative, and I really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned a lot, and I would like to see you as our guest in future to talk about other matters as well. So thank you for being our guest. And if our audience, if they want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I have a Twitter account, or I'm on Twitter as AQANIT, A Qanit. My profile name is Abdul Hai Qanit. I use Twitter a lot. I have Facebook ID, but I'm mostly on Twitter. That's the best way to be connected to our friends in your audience.
Okay, I will put your Twitter link in the description of this episode. Thank you very much. To our audience, if you like to support the Afghan Eye, please visit our PayPal page or our Patreon page. Until next episode, take care of each other and yourself. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.